In 1848, a congressman named Abraham Lincoln stood at the edge of Niagara Falls. He didn't just write about the beautiful majesty of the water. He wrote about the extinct giants whose bones fill the mounds of America. This wasn't a metaphor. In the 19th century, finding 9, 10, even 12-foot skeletons in the American Midwest was as common as finding an arrowhead. The New York Times even published 40 stories on these discoveries. They described massive skulls, double rows of teeth, and a 6-fingered hands. But if you go to the Smithsonian today and ask to see those crates, they'll tell you they don't exist, that it was all yellow journalism or misidentified mammoths. But in 1947, a discovery in a cave halfway across the world proved that these giants weren't just a myth. They were a nightmare that almost wiped us out entirely. To understand why these bones are being hidden, you first have to understand what, not who, the Nephilim actually were. The word Nephilim itself comes from the Hebrew root Nephal, meaning the fallen ones. Ancient texts like Genesis 6 and the Book of Enoch describe a group of watchers, angelic beings tasked with observing Earth. They broke their primeval laws. They didn't just observe, they intervened. They took human wives, and the resulting offspring were called the Nephilim. These weren't just tall people. Ancient Sumerian tablets and the Torah describes them as a biological anomaly. They were born with 6 fingers and 6 toes, double rows of teeth, and they were described as having an insatiable hunger and a violent nature that humanity simply couldn't defend against. In every culture's golden age, myths from Greek Titans to the Sumerian Anunnaki, you find the same story. A race of demigods who were the architects of the ancient world. But who eventually turned into its greatest predators? Admitting these skeletons exist isn't just an archaeological correction. It's an admission that our DNA may have been tampered with by something from above. Between 1850 and 1920, thousands of burial mounds were leveled across the United States. The reports were consistent. In 1897, in Grafton, West Virginia, a 9-foot skeleton was found in a stone vault. In 1911, Lovelock Cave, Nevada, miners found red-haired giants and sandals 15 inches long, a size 20 in modern terms. Then there's the double row anomaly, skulls found with 2 full sets of teeth, a genetic marker mentioned in ancient texts across 3 different continents. These weren't tall humans, they were something else. And the Smithsonian Institution was there for almost every major find. Records show their agents arriving at the sites, cataloguing the remains and shipping them back to DC for analysis. And that is where the trail goes cold. They call it Building 10, a black hole for history. The official story is that these bones were fragile and crumbled to dust. But why would the premier scientific body on Earth lose the most important archaeological evidence in human history? To answer that, we have to look at what was found in 1947. While the Smithsonian was busy scrubbing the American record, a shepherd boy in Palestine threw a rock into a cave and heard pottery shatter. He had found the Dead Sea Scrolls, but buried among the scripture was a document so terrifying it was suppressed further for decades. The Book of Giants. This text doesn't describe the Nephilim as wise ancient aliens or gods. It describes them as a biological monster. It claims these hybrids had appetites the Earth couldn't sustain. According to the scrolls, They consumed hundreds of thousands of pounds of meat daily. When the livestock ran out, they turned on the animals. When the animals ran out, they turned on humanity. The 1947 scrolls describe a world of total ecological collapse. We weren't the masters of the ancient world, we had become livestock. The Great Flood, mentioned in nearly every ancient culture, wasn't just a random act of God. According to these texts, it was a global system reset, a desperate measure to stop a predator that was literally eating the world alive. But we have to look at the rational wall, because for every giant skeleton, there's a giant skeptic with a shovel. And we have to be honest about the facts. First, the Lincoln quote. Skeptics will argue Lincoln was looking at mastodon bones. In 1848, farmers often found mammoth femurs, and because they lacked a full skeleton to compare them to, they assumed that they were giant people. Second, the Smithsonian cover-up. They aren't necessarily hiding giants to protect Darwinism. They're following NAGPRA. Since 1990, federal law has required museums to return Native American remains to their tribes for burial. If the Smithsonian lost the bones, it's often because they were returned and reburied away from public view. Third, the teeth. Double rows are often just the impacted wisdom teeth, or extreme wear from diet of stone ground grain, which makes the jawbone look like it has a second row of teeth. So, it's all just a big misunderstanding, right? Bad science, mammoth bones, case closed. Except for one detail the Smithsonian can't explain. In 1881, field reports from the Smithsonian's own Bureau of Ethnology, their agent, Peter Bunzel, reported finding a skeleton in an Ohio mound that was so large that the skull could fit over a man's head like a helmet. If it was a mammoth, Bunzel, a trained field agent, would have known the difference. The Smithsonian isn't hiding the bones because they're afraid of the Bible. They're hiding them because the 1947 scrolls were right. These beings weren't just big, they were genetic anomaly. And admitting they existed means admitting that humanity was once almost erased by something we couldn't fight. History is a story written by a select group of people, but the Earth has a way of holding on to its truth. If the accounts from the 1800s are real and the 1947 scrolls are accurate, then the giants aren't just a myth. But I want to hear from you. Why do you think that the Smithsonian is so quick to label these as hoaxes? Is it scientific integrity, or is there something in Building 10 that would change our understanding of humans forever? And if you enjoyed this deep dive into the Forbidden Archives, hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications. We're just scratching the surface of what they don't want you to see.